All right, before we look at the geometry figures for this week, let's refresh our mind. Let's refresh how do we do proportions, right? We learned this back in pre-algebra, in algebra 1 as well. We saw it. Proportion is basically when two fractions are equal to each other, okay? So we got to remember how to solve for it. So basically, we're looking for the value of the letter there. Now we learn how to cross multiply. To get rid of fractions, we cross multiply. So I'm going to go 3 times n, which is 3n. This is going to equal to 8 times 6. 8 times 6 is 48. So I have that 3n is equal to 48. Now let me divide. To get the n by itself, let me divide both sides by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. It cancels out. So I get n is equal to, use a calculator if you need to, 48 divided by 3 is 16. Now, when you type in my answer, you don't have to type in n equals, just type in 16. Some of your answers are going to be a whole number, like this is the case. Some of your answers, you might have decimals. So on your instructions, I'm going to say round to the nearest hundredth if necessary. Okay, so hundredth, what does that mean? Because it ends on the word th, in the letters th, I know it's a decimal. So I'm going to be running decimals. Hundredth sounds like the number 100. Right? 100 has 2 zeros. So when it comes to decimals, 2 decimal places. So round it to 2 decimal places if necessary. Okay, let's take a look at question number 2. We're going to cross multiply in order for us to get rid of fractions. We multiplied this way. Now, m plus 1 times 7. Because there's a plus or minus as part of our fraction, the 7, the number by itself, I'm going to go 7 times m and 7 times 1. So it's going to give me 7m plus 7. So again, notice I went 7 times m and 7 times 1. And obviously the plus in between. So that gave me 7m plus 7. Okay, the other way, remember because it's cross multiplication, 8 times 3, I get 24. So then I get 7m plus 7 is equal to 24. No more fractions. I want the 7m by itself. So this plus 7, let me move it to the other side as a minus 7. Let me separate it through the equal sign, right? When I said one side or the other side, basically there's a separation through the equal sign. So on the left side, I have 7m. On the right side, 24 minus 7, that's 17. Now to get the m by itself, let me divide by 7, because the 7s will cancel out, so it's 1. 1m is basically m. 17 divided by 7. According to my calculator, I get a big decimal. I get 2.428571429. Okay, bunch of decimals. Remember I said round it to the nearest hundredth. So 2 decimal places. I do take a look at the third decimal place. If it is big enough is 5 or more, it pushes the previous number 1 up. 8 is big enough, so that's going to push the 2, right, the previous number 1 up. So my answer in this case should be 2.43. If my third decimal place was small, small means 4 or less, my answer would have been 2.42. Okay, so we do remember how to do proportions. Now we're going to move into what we call similar figures. I know I used the word congruent before. Congruent, let me come back to congruent. Remember, we talked about congruent last semester. Congruent meant same shape, same size. The shape is basically represented like this. So same shape, and there was an equal sign at the bottom, which meant same size. Now we're going to move into the word similar. And similar is going to be this. So similar, what it means is same shape. We don't care about the size, just the same shape. Kind of like the movies, right? You guys have gone to the movies. At the very, very front of the movie theater, there's a big screen. But if you look on the very, very back, there's a tiny screen, right? And it's the same shape, just different sizes. That's what we call similar. In order for two things to be similar, we need to meet two things. First of all, in order for the shape to be the same shape, the angles have to be the same. So I'm just going to write same angles. We don't want to have a picture all distorted. We want it to look the same. So if there's any angles, we're going to keep the same angles. The other criteria we have to meet, because I said two, sides are proportional. So in order for figures to be similar, they need to have the same angles. So if there's any angles, they have to be the same, and the sides have to be proportional. Okay, so some of you might be thinking, oh, proportional, we just did proportions. Okay, I'll talk about that in a minute, okay? So let's take a look. Question number 3. The instructions for questions 3 to 6 are going to be state if the polygons are similar. So I have to say yes, they're similar, or no, not similar. Okay, so angle-wise, the angles that I see, 105, 105, yep, angles are the same. Now, when it comes to sides, because remember I said the sides have to be proportional, the numbers that I see on the top figure are the numbers 15 and 21. And then that repetition of 15 and 21 again. I noticed from 15 from the top figure is corresponding with 10. So 15 goes with 10 and 21 goes with 14. Okay, so proportional. Two ways how to check these things are proportional. One way, simplify your fractions. 15 over 10, simplify it. And then 21 over 14, simplify it as well. If these two are proportional, the fractions will simplify to the same thing. Okay, so let's see. 15 over 10, I'm going to say that simplifies to 3 over 2. I divided each of these by 5. 21 over 14, I'm going to say, let me divide each by 7. So I'm going to say this simplifies to 3 over 2. Okay, so my fractions did simplify to the same thing. So the angles were the same. The sides are proportional. So I'm going to call this similar. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh man, simplifying fractions, I'm not that good at it. Okay, so I'm going to show you a different way. If you don't know how to simplify fractions, if you struggle with that, I'm going to say proportional fractions, when you cross multiply, you should get the same thing. So if I go 15 times 14, right? Use a calculator if you need to. 15 times 14 is 210. Then I cross multiply this way. 21 times 10 is 210. I get the same number, the same result. Therefore, my fractions are proportional. So again, to check for proportional, either simplify the fractions, simplify to the same thing, or cross multiply. You should get the same number. Okay, here, the angles were the same, sides were proportional. So yeah, this was similar. Let's take a look at question number 4. I look at the angles, I compare the angles. I look the top two angles of my first figure and I compare with the other figure. Yeah, they seem to be the same. The bottom angles, yeah, they seem to be the same. Okay, so the angles are the same. Now let's compare the sides. The difference of the numbers that I see on the top, I see 9, I see 9.4, and I see 16. Okay, so I'm going to do three fractions because I see three different numbers. Now 9.4, I see it twice, but I'm only going to write it once. Now 9 is corresponding with 5. So I'm going to write a 5 here. 9.4 is corresponding with 4. And 16 is corresponding with 8. Okay, so my cross multiplying works only with two fractions, okay? Two fractions at the same time. Now I can simplify if possible. My last fraction, 16 over 8, that's 2 over 1, right? My fraction in the first fraction, 9 over 5, that's the best that I can do, 9 over 5. I see two fractions that are not the same. In order for these to be similar, all of my fractions have to be proportional. I found two that are not. So I don't need to check the third one. I'm just going to say this is not similar. The angles have to be equal and the sides have to be proportional. Okay. So not similar because the sides were not proportional. Let's take a look at question number 5. Let me compare the sides that we have. Okay, so from the top figure, the figure on the top, I see 12, I see 7.8, and I see 18. Okay. Now 12 is corresponding with 4. 7.8 is corresponding with 2.6, and 18 is corresponding with 6. Ooh, okay. 12 over 4, that's 3, right? This is 3. 18 over 6, 18 divided by 6 is also 3. Ooh, let's take a look at the one in the middle. 7.8 divided by 2.6. That's also 3. Okay, so my sides, they're all proportional because they simplify to the same thing. My angles, they seem to be the same thing, right? The angles on both angles are equal. So sides are proportional, angles are the same. Therefore, these figures are similar. Lastly, let's take a look at number 6. Okay, the numbers on the top, I only see a 30 and 24. So only two fractions. I see 30s corresponding with 25 and 24 is corresponding with 20. So I'm gonna say, all right, let's take a look. If you want to simplify fractions, let's simplify fractions. If you don't like to simplify fractions, cross multiplied. You should get the same thing. If you like to simplify fractions, 30 over 25, I will say divide each by 5. And then 24 over 20, I will say divide each by 4. But let me try the new method, right? We know how to simplify fractions, but let's try the new method that I just mentioned. Let me cross multiply. 25 times 24. That's 600. 30 times 20. That's 600. Okay. I'm going to say these sides are proportional. If I would have simplified my fractions, I would have gotten 6 over 5 on each. Again, you can either simplify the fractions or cross multiply. Sides are proportional. Now let's take a look at my angles. This is 75 and this is 80. Not the same angles, right? Not similar. In some of our cases, I want to check if you guys are paying attention. Some of our cases, so in your homework, you might see two parallelograms like this. I might say this is 80, and then I will say this angle on the top here is 100. I want to just point out two different numbers. I want to see if you're paying attention. Now, 80 and 100, these angles are not corresponding, right? This 80 goes right here. Now, I will say, I want you to see different numbers to be like, oh, they're not similar right away. However, in this case, they would be similar. Like I said, this is a separate example. In this case, they will be similar because remember, in a parallelogram, two adjacent angles, two angles are next to each other, they need to add up to 180. So angle-wise will be okay. Now, in our question number 6 here, 75 and 80, they were corresponding angles, and the numbers were different. That's why I said this is not similar. But again, on your homework, I might throw in some adjacent angles just to see if you're paying attention. Okay.